Hello everyone, welcome to Lifestyle at the Peacock. I'm Fatmeh. So last episode we were talking about mental health, Moko and I, and we didn't finish everything. We promised a part two. Today I asked Moko to grace us again and we will continue the topic today. Hopefully we'll cover much more. So today we will be touching mainly on the corporate world. What are companies doing about mental health for their people and so on. And since Moko is an HR expert, she will give us an insight more into the topic. Mental health has been linked to an imbalance of a special chemical in the brain that are called neurotransmitters. But since we're not scientists here or doctors, we just daily people, Moko and I will try and dive into this topic as best as we can cover, from personal experiences, from neighborhood, from our friends and all that. Hopefully we can give you guys enough information on mental health. So here we are again with Moko. Thank you, Moko, for coming, making time for me. Thank you. And for our viewers.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I love our chit chat.
I do. Too.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
We don't want to end it.
Yeah.
So last episode, we realized there was so much more about this topic.
Yeah.
And I think even with today, we wouldn't be able to cover all of it.
No.
As much as we can. And we talked a lot more about mental health in society, schools, and all that. So maybe today we can delve deeper into the corporate world, as you are the pro in that.
Sure. No, I mean, I think, after our conversation, our last conversation, I tried to kind of think about what do we put into a very, limited amount of time talking about, mental health, in the workplace specifically. And like you rightfully put it, like it's such a huge topic. There's just so much in there. But I think if I reflect back on what we spoke about, we talked about how it manifests and all the potential contributors and the challenges that we have in terms of just being able to to acknowledge and have a conversation around the emotional, the head and mind stuff. And work-related stress are big ones that do kind of contribute to mental ill health, right? So, and it's something that I think a lot of organizations do have to talk about and acknowledge and realize that it's real, but also be able to identify what are the stresses, what causes people stress in the workplace. Things like depression, is another one that also is a manifestation in terms of one's mental health, and so we spoke about like how like the symptoms of that, like the stress that happens in the workplace and how it kind of shows up, when people bring their stuff, suddenly either I'm completely isolating, I'm not talking to people, I'm not really participating in meetings, or I'm super like aggressive. Like everything that is said is just, I need to be screaming and shouting. And I, even just like sending an email, you get these emails where you're just like, okay.
Sometimes you need to stop and breathe.
Yeah, you're just like, yeah. So I think those are all kind of different ways that you can kind of like also just alarm bells to say, okay, something is not okay. I think the onus, obviously, we spoke about the stigma and all of that. I think the onus is always on like the leaders in the organization. So you are an employer, you have people that work for you, etc. And there's a role that you play as the head, as a leader, to be able to kind of assess your team. So, and that's how you kind of are able to also support people, through their struggles.
Yeah.
Because in the ideal world, I think the expectation is almost like if you have a bunch of employees in your space and you start to notice certain things, you're very active, you're very engaging, very positive, is no longer showing up in that way for you. When they're in the meeting, they're at the back of the room. Suddenly, they say very little. When they do say something, it's very negative, for example. And those are also ways for you to be able to kind of assess. And I think to a large extent, finding a way that, our leaders have been able to identify that something's changed and be able to have a healthy, constructive conversation to say, hey, Fatmeh, I noticed something's changed, without being judgmental, without being accusatory, because, like we said, it's something that people shy away from. And, conscious or not, it's a very sensitive topic. So, when somebody calls you and says, Mark, I actually see that something is wrong, one also has to be very, very careful in terms of how you bring that across.
Yes.
Right? So it's about coming in with a supportive mentality as a leader. So it's not about starting with, I see that you're not participating in meetings anymore.
Which many leaders do, huh? Many, especially in Africa.
For sure. And I think, again, it's around, from an organizational point of view, it's not so much about just creating the awareness with employees and the staff and having those, various interventions, but it's how do you equip our leaders, our managers, our supervisors to enable them to be able to, identify where there are issues, but also be quite supportive as well, and enabling them to have that conversation, because it's not an easy conversation. And that you're talking about, especially as Africans, and the stigma. Even for myself as a leader, how do I get past my own stigma, my own stereotype? Because that's what I need to do. I need to bridge that gap before I can start actually having.
Because I don't mean to cut you off. It's easy. What I've realized, it's easy. As a leader, if you are one of those that think, we should be strong, or, even though you may be going through a lot yourself, but because you want to put up this front, because society expects you to be, the tough one mentally, even if it's a farce, people do that. And now you bring that into your organization and expect, like, even though you notice that somebody is not performing the way, or something is wrong, I think where good leadership will come in is if you, like you're saying, you go past your own barriers or whatever you think you expect of yourself, you expect of someone, but reach out and extend a hand and allow someone to actually speak to you without judgment. Because I know even in a family setting, we do get these things where maybe you have the tough dad. Or the tough mom that never breaks down in front of you. And now you going through so much, now you feel like, oh my God, I can't show my dad that I'm weak. Because there's this stigma where mental health is on people that are not mentally strong. That's how people see it in society. And now I have to put up a front or pretend all is well until things get out of hands, just because the leader in our household is not encouraging vulnerability in many ways. And I think that's happening in many companies, in many organizations.
For sure. And I think so, from an HR standpoint, it's also around bridging sort of those gaps. So in our leadership programs, because all the corporates have quite a lot around leadership development and all of these lovely things, and it's very typically the kind of leadership development sort of programs that are developed and implemented in organizations focus on how to give feedback, how to just some very silly examples, how to give feedback, how to conduct a performance conversation, how to do a performance review. And I'm being it's really, really basic. Obviously, going into quite a lot more depth around strategic thinking and all of those things. So the one thing that I feel we need to kind of sort of bring into our programs from an organizational standpoint is issues around kind of mental health and mental ill health, what that looks like, how it manifests, being able to find the balance, because that's the challenge with leaders. I always say to people, when you kind of sign up for that role, you almost, because it's easy to be an employee, because you only have one side. I just have to focus on myself as an employee. The minute you start to kind of, manage others, you then kind of lose that I'm an employee. You are, but then you have to constantly have this balance between, organizations kind of sort of objectives, which is around productivity, around profits, around revenue, around customer service, around all of those things, but also at the same time, kind of having to make sure that we have well-balanced employees in the team. So how do we then equip our leaders? Because traditionally, you got promoted into a leadership role, not because you have any interest or that you have any inclination or skills around leadership. It was just a way that you kind of like, I've worked here long enough, it's now to move into a leadership role. But you're not given the tools to be able to have those, to be a true leader, to show up for people. And so the challenge is in our leadership programs, we now have to start to actually equip our leaders to be able to have these conversations, to be able to say,
not just to boss around.
Not just to say, oh, you're not delivering, oh, you're not this and that, but being able to discern between somebody, I've had this person in my team for a while, they have been a very good, consistent performer, something has happened, all right, and instead of focusing on the what has happened, is to have a conversation about, I see, right? I see that there has been a change in you in some way. And these are some examples of ways in which things have changed. I see you're not participating as much, in the meetings, you used to be somebody that used to have lots of ideas and suggestions. That's not happening anymore. You're not showing up on time, things like that. And instead of kind of, immediately going into what is not working, sort of saying, okay, so how can I help? What is it that you need to enable you to be where you were prior? I know that you're a member of my team that is consistent, etc., but something's changed. And we're not expecting, I don't have an expectation that leaders are not going to become like counselors, right? Because that's, even for me, as an HR person, I'm not a counselor. I always have to tell people I'll listen. I obviously have a lot more.
Point them in the right direction.
But I can point you in the right direction. But at least I'm able to kind of discern. I'm able to at least have that conversation, So noticing things like absenteeism, and a spike in absenteeism, noticing things in terms of moods, of mood swings, late coming, those kind of things are also signs of things not going, so well. So it's about unpacking and understanding what those are. Some of them are work induced. So, even things like discrimination, it's a thing for us. It's a real thing that's happening to us. Whether you're being discriminated against based on your gender, I'm not getting opportunities, I'm getting sidelined, I'm getting sexually harassed for that matter. Those are all things, and you mentioned earlier about kind of having to be the strong one. You're not gonna, let's not be vulnerable. A lot of us are not able to actually talk to anybody and share that I'm feeling, discriminated against in some way, because also remember that a lot of it can also be very much like in my head.
Yeah, it's true. But if there's a safe space for you to voice that, I feel like you can someone would say to you, like you get to the bottom of it, then you understand that, oh, I'm just being in my own head too much, or someone else will say, you know what, it's true. I also went through 1, 2, 3. And I think my other question is, Moko, as an HR professional yourself, do you think companies are doing more in terms of the wellness side of, the corporate wellness? Are they investing much in that as opposed to, because I know even through friends, I have many friends at corporate, what do you call it? But mostly you hear them, they stress, they overworked, overtime, and like when you get together, you can feel they're even not there with you because there's so much happening. And yes, there are leadership courses that they come up with, but in my mind, I feel like this is more on productivity. Like the companies want production or want people to be productive more than caring for the employees in terms of wellness.
Yeah. So it's a very difficult question to answer. So I think there's some organizations that have truly invested in wellness, and the bigger the I know that like some big organizations or big corporates actually have whole wellness like departments. In the smaller organizations, it can be also a little bit, it can be quite an expensive, or at least perceived to be quite an expensive, thing. So what you will find is that you will find that like wellness is kind of sitting somewhere in HR, it's a side thing, as opposed to having like a dedicated resource focusing on that. I do think that there are some corporates who are truly invested. I think that the ones that are invested, I think of them, you see them, because it's something that manifests.
Yes.
You will see it in the way that you experience customer service. You will see it when you walk into a building and people are, the employees are smiling. Because remember that a lot of the work that happens in terms of addressing the mental well-being has to do with creating a culture, a culture of openness, a culture where discrimination and sexual harassment and all of those kind of things are not tolerated. But it's not just in words, but with action.
With action.
With action. Where there's a real sort of investment in terms of counseling and physical, emotional, well-being initiatives. So it's either gyms or I know that some organizations subsidize gym memberships to encourage people to move because that is also a way in which to ensure that you have optimal mental health, right? If you're moving as well and you're eating well, things like that. A lot of companies are partnering up with their medical aids because the medical aids have now realized that they have a vested interest in being proactive around health.
Yes.
Okay, so whereas in the past you had a medical aid that was just like, here you go, just pay your premium, go to the doctor, what. They're now actually being quite proactive by giving rewards and really encouraging and working with organizations to really try and support employees to not wait until I've got a stress related ailment, but to actually
spend more.
Exactly. So they are then spending more, and so on. So to answer the question, I think there are some. I don't think we're there yet. I think we're still quite far.
Especially in Africa, especially maybe in Namibia and many African countries.
Well, I can't talk to Africa proper. And I say Africa proper because as Sham.
As someone from the West and living in the South. So I see these things, and as a corporate wellness coach myself, I know I've lived here for a while now, but I don't feel that culture.
Fair enough.
Yes, I don't feel that culture. I don't feel like, even when I speak to friends, that they do. Some companies will pay for gym membership and all, but what I find as well, Moko, is that is also another source of stress, because now you're expected to go to the gym, but let's say you have minimal problems, whether it's from your home, maybe you're going through domestic abuse or whatever. Like, people have so many things we deal with on a daily basis, But now you expect it, then you have to pick up your kid. You have to drop them to so. But now you have to also use a gym membership. Oh, it gets overwhelming. I'm speaking from experience, not on the other things, but like how, fitness is like it used to be. Now my mindset is changed. Now I embrace it. I love it. I want to go every day.
Yeah.
But there was a time when I'm like, oh,
here we go.
Really? Do I have to go to the gym again? Because I have so much going on for me. I have to finish this, I have to do this, So when employees are overworked, for example, or, the important side of their mental wellness or well-being and not actually being addressed.
Yeah. Like I said, I don't think we're doing enough as a whole. So if I look at the entire Namibia, I think we can definitely do a hell of a lot more. Yeah. I do feel, however, and I'm going to flog this thing to death, I do feel like that is the one positive thing that has literally come out of the pandemic for us. Because we have realized that, the way that we have thought about work has changed so dramatically. And all the things that came with the pandemic, the anxiety and the drama of that has forced us to have a different kind of outlook around saying, oh, wait, I can't just focus now on, because people are freaked out for real. Yeah. How do we deal with that? Yeah. And so I feel like that has already spurred this revolution around, looking at, like the total well-being of an employee beyond just what I do.
Yeah. So Moko, I think we once again running out of time with this big topic of our lives. So to wrap up, what in your opinion, what do you think that organizations can do to improve a healthy workspace in terms of, mental well-being, for the employees and themselves? Because honestly, I think it starts, I know we talked about this before, but it starts from the leadership level. Because, like I mentioned once, me as a mom, if I can also acknowledge that I do have issues, I have stress, I will be able to understand when my child comes to me and say, Mommy, I don't feel good about so. What do you think?
So I think the topic is we can spend a couple of hours, but you're spot on. I mean, I think we can't take away the role of the leader, because I think the first thing that we have to do in a corporate is kind of just recognize and acknowledge that mental health is actually a really critical part of success of our business. If people are in the best possible shape, mentally, physically, and emotionally, you automatically get the benefit of that in terms of revenue and all of that to improve customer service, innovation, and all of those kind of things. So I think it's about creating a space where we sort of start to recognize that staff their mental health is important. Yes. It's putting in place sort of initiatives, creating awareness, and also making sure that the stigma related to mental health is somehow taken away, and that can only happen by creating this openness. So, and you talked about we talked about creating safe spaces for people to go. So we need to create those spaces in our organizations where people can feel safe, to be themselves, to be vulnerable, to be able to speak, know that information is confidential. Yes. It will be treated with the necessary sensitivity and respect. It's around making sure that we have ongoing awareness drives, because like I said at the very beginning, that is where the power happens. We need to, because people don't know what they don't know. Yeah. Right? So we need to start having the conversation, right? And this is bringing in professionals. We have the counselors coming in, we have doctors coming in, because remember that, mental health is not just it's so all encompassing.
Yes.
So we need to have all of these professionals that are dealing with all of these things in their various, manifestations, come in and talk. And the more, and it has to happen quite often,
Yes.
because it's not enough to have one conversation a year.
Yeah, and you disappear. And that's
not, that's not useful. So it's those kind of things. It's about, acknowledging and recognizing. It's about allowing vulnerability. It's about creating safe spaces so that people can talk, but that they feel they can have conversations, and that it's confidential. It's about destigmatizing, this topic. Yeah. So things like, sort of stress, creating an environment where discriminatory practices are really frowned upon, yes. And not just in voice, but that we action them. Yes. People are dismissed. People are, are taken to task for discriminatory practices in the employment practices that we have. That we try and make sure that there's no room or space for people to feel in any way either overworked, discriminated against, etc. So it's also reviewing our own employment practices. Yes. Whether it's the way that we recruit, whether it's the way that we promote, whether it's the way that we performance, manage, whether it's in the way that we support staff, that those practices are very pro emotional support, and that we recognize that there are some people who need to be accommodated in our organizations because they just generally cannot cope. Things like anxiety, we bypass them. Yeah. But you can't put somebody in the into a customer-facing, highly stressed environment when they suffer from an anxiety disorder.
No, you don't expect them to.
Exactly, but we don't say, "Oh, you can't hire you because if you can't work with people, then you've got a problem." Yeah. But it's how do we then accommodate? What do we do in our employment practices? How do we second? How do we transfer? How do we sort of look at splitting work? How do we accommodate flexible working hours? How do we, for all of those things? Because, and I think in a lot of, you talked about, having friends, etc., who work in corporates, who don't get to balance life, who feeling under so much immense pressure because they're working overtime and things like that. So in our organization, it's recognizing that we are doing, like our environments is, is causing all of this, disarray. And so how do we make sure that the way that we create work, the spaces that we create in our offices, in our buildings, how do we make sure that those are accommodating the people? That we look at the mom that has to go and pick up, or the dad that has to go and pick up the kids, and not make them feel like they have to rush in terms of hours. And like I said, that's why I feel like the pandemic, with all its issues that it's brought, I think it's really forced
an eye-opener.
Honestly, because I think for the first time, people are like, oh wait, we can do remote working. Oh wait, we can buy laptops. Actually, we've got laptops. Maybe we should actually get people to use them outside of the office. Yeah. But it's okay because, and also the way that I look at work, the way that I measure work, because we're obsessed about Fatmeh must show up at 8 and Fatmeh must leave at 5. Yeah. And in fact, if Fatmeh leaves at 8 in the evening, then Fatmeh is a top. But actually, Fatmeh is doing absolutely zero in that time.
Yes.
And
that's also that's a good topic.
So these are all things that I think organizations can really try and do. Yeah. And have the flexibility.
Work on people's strengths and and
so it's So I think those are things, and I think where people are feeling supported and valued, a lot of that stuff has a lot to do with that. Yes. That I had the flexibility. I was able to go and share my circumstance at home, and I was accommodated in my office. Yes. I wasn't judged, I wasn't sidelined, I wasn't victimized, but I actually felt supported, because I had this situation. Someone heard me, and then somebody took action. They said, you know what, let's make your job so that you can work 3 days a week from home because your circumstances are unfortunately or fortunately are just not, allowing you. So it's creating those kind of things.
And you perform actually much better than, like you say, expecting them to show up at a certain time.
Yeah.
And my mind is not there because I have to deal with these, I have to take my kid here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think.
But I think I just want to add also that, all of these things need to be done in the context of the parameters of the organizations, right? So I think that there's a lot of staff who feel like, because I'm going through this thing, I absolutely have to be accommodated. And there are sometimes when organizations just they can't. And it's just because of either the nature of the work, they don't have the resources in terms of money. And that's something that we have to acknowledge. So within the parameters of what an organization can allow and can do, I think that these are, and it's not exhaustive. Obviously, we can do a lot more.
I mean, you can even discuss it. You can talk about it so that, if you can't afford it as an organization, or like you say, it's not within the parameters and all that. But I think if I'm made to understand that this is how it is, I don't think I'll expect much more. It's all about communicating as well. Yeah. I mean, I don't know, I'm not in your shoes.
But I think that's what I mean. That's why I think it goes back to kind of creating that environment in that space, where it's not taboo.
Yes.
To not be okay.
Yes. Yeah.
And beyond physically. If I have depression, granted, depression is one of those things that's also really difficult to identify. But if I do, I should be able to go and say to my boss, listen, I'm going through a situation now. I actually have depression. What I need is X, Y, and Z. So being able to kind of say that this is a situation without
expecting to be fired,
without feeling like I'm going to be victimized. So it's also taking away that stigma. I think there's a lot that organizations have to do around making sure that this situation of ours is severely destigmatized, because I think this is the new headache and
I was just gonna say
and gastro.
I was just gonna say that
not to be
you can walk in, like someone can come to you, Moko, you know what, I have a headache. That's normal. Yeah. So, but I can't come to you and say, Moko, I have a problem. And then you find people, I don't want to deal with her problems, your problem can't be my problem. I've heard all these things.
No, for sure.
I think, like you say, it should be the new norm where just as I can come and say, you know what, Moko, I think today I can't even stand up. I feel dizzy. But it's so easy for me to come and say that to you than to say to you, Moko, I didn't sleep well last night. I have so and so. And I think it all goes back to how maybe you'll be dealing with your things now, and I'm coming on to you and telling you, I didn't sleep well. And it's a thing where we should just all be aware of this. And
the best places I've worked and the best bosses I've had are the ones where I have been allowed to be absolutely vulnerable, where I have put up my hand and said, I am actually burnt out. I am either approaching burnout or I'm there. Yeah. So what I need. But I also recognize that I have a very strong sense of self and awareness. And so I'm able to recognize that, and I'm able to articulate it and ask for the help. I recognize that that's not something that everybody has. But the best bosses have not been the ones who promoted me and given me big ups on the work that I've done on some project. It's the ones who said, you know what, take the day. Go home and take your 2 days, sort yourself out and come back.
That makes you immediately feel like you have to
and then have called me to say, how's it going? Are you still alive? Is everything okay? Are the kids okay? Whatever, So that's what I mean. It's about creating that environment.
Thank you very much, Moko. I think down the line we will have another.
No, there's a part 7.
A part 7 coming up. Yeah, but I really appreciate
Thanks
this, Moko.
so much
Thank
for having me. Yeah.
As usual, it's always fun chatting to you.
Absolutely.
And I can't
likewise.
wait for us to finish this and then we'll go into our books.
Yeah.
We have to talk about books. Thank you guys for listening. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope we covered enough for you. Until next time, stay safe, be kind.